The Quiet Expansion, 1815–1898. Part 1. After the War that Broke Empires. When the cannons finally fell silent in 1815, Europe believed it had survived its own destruction. Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated. Armies returned home. Monarchs reclaimed their thrones. Diplomats gathered in grand halls and spoke confidently about balance, order, and stability. The Congress of Vienna promised a restored world, one where revolutions would be contained and history would return to its proper course. But history does not reverse. It only waits. The Napoleonic Wars had not merely redrawn borders. They had shattered the illusion that power was permanent. Entire generations had lived under conscription, economic collapse, and ideological chaos. Empires had mobilized everything they had, their money, their people, their legitimacy, and in doing so, exposed the limits of imperial rule. Europe emerged victorious, but hollow. Britain ruled the seas, yet carried staggering debt. France reclaimed dignity, but remained politically fractured. Austria, Prussia, and Russia governed vast territories filled with populations who increasingly questioned why inherited power should rule their lives at all. The old world still stood, but it no longer stood confidently. And across the Atlantic, a nation that had once been an afterthought was watching carefully. The United States of America did not emerge from the Napoleonic era triumphant or celebrated. It emerged unnoticed. That obscurity was its advantage. While Europe obsessed over preserving dynasties and suppressing dissent, America focused on something far less glamorous, something far more dangerous. It focused on building, not glory, not prestige, not empire, capacity. Unlike Europe, America had no ancient borders to defend and no royal bloodlines to protect. Its survival depended entirely on function. If its economy failed, it would collapse. If its internal cohesion fractured, it would disappear. There were no safety nets of tradition. So America did what empires rarely do. It invested in itself. The decision to expand westward rather than outward was not romantic. It was not driven by ideology alone. It was driven by mathematics. A nation that controlled its own land, fed its own people, and produced its own goods did not need to beg or borrow from empires. Every mile west strengthened internal trade. Every new settlement increased agricultural output. Every river mapped, road built, and rail planned tightened the economic web binding the continent together. Where European empires ruled diverse populations separated by oceans, America fused territory into a single, growing system. This was not conquest for prestige, it was consolidation for independence. Europe mistook this inward focus for weakness. That mistake would echo for a century. By the 1820s and 1830s, European powers remained locked in a delicate balancing act. Revolutions flared in Spain, Italy, and later across the continent. Empires spent enormous resources suppressing unrest, policing colonies, and maintaining the illusion of control. America, meanwhile, avoided entanglement, not because it lacked ambition, but because it understood timing. Power delayed is often power multiplied. As industrialization accelerated, the difference between the old world and the new became impossible to ignore. European empires had built their wealth on extraction, gold, spices, labor, and tribute pulled from colonies and shipped home. That model required constant enforcement. It depended on military presence, administrative oversight, and the submission of subject peoples. America built something different. It built factories. Factories did not require obedience. They required efficiency. They rewarded innovation, punished stagnation, and scaled without the moral and military costs of empire. Machines did what armies once had to do: produce dominance. Steel mills, textile plants, and mechanized farms transformed raw resources into exponential wealth. Productivity no longer grew linearly, it exploded. And because America controlled its own supply chains, Land, labor, transportation, it did not need to fight wars to maintain them. Empires bled to stay rich. America grew rich by design. This transformation went largely unnoticed because it lacked spectacle. There were no coronations, no imperial parades, no colonial flags raised over distant capitals, just output. And output, over time, outpaces everything. By mid-century, the United States was no longer merely surviving. It was accelerating. Railroads stretched across states, linking farms to cities, cities to ports, ports to global markets. Information traveled faster. Goods moved cheaper. Labor flowed where demand surged. The nation functioned as a single economic organism. European empires, by contrast, remained fragmented, wealth flowing outward from colonies, back to metropoles, then outward again, constantly leaking energy through resistance, rebellion, and inefficiency. America had no such leak. Then came the human factor. While Europe struggled under rigid hierarchies and limited mobility, America opened its doors. Millions crossed the Atlantic not just to escape poverty, but to escape ceilings. Engineers barred by class, artisans trapped by guilds, scientists constrained by patronage. They brought skills Europe could not afford to lose, and America was ready to absorb. Every immigrant was a silent transfer of power. Knowledge left empires and took root in a nation that rewarded scale over lineage. This was not charity, it was accumulation. By the 1850s, America had achieved something unprecedented: sustained growth without imperial overstretch. It had not conquered the world. It had made conquest unnecessary. And yet, the greatest test was still to come. Because no system, no matter how efficient, survives without being tested by fracture. That fracture would arrive not from abroad, but from within.